My name is Dr. James Harrison. For 15 years, I've lived in pursuit of the logical, the explainable, the truth behind the veil of superstition. Ghost ships, vanishing planes, cursed waters, they've all been fodder for my work. One by one, I've exposed their mysteries. Every spectre reduced to data, every legend neatly dissected by science. And I was good at it, too good. They started calling me the man who killed the wonder of the seas. That's why, when the opportunity came to study the Bermuda Triangle, I couldn't resist. The place where reason supposedly goes to die. My final triumph. The crown jewel in a career spent dismantling the unknown. The Navy gave us their blessing, or at least, that's how they made it sound. Clearance that bypassed layers of bureaucracy, coordinates scribbled on files that looked too pristine to be trusted. There was an eagerness in their cooperation that gnawed at me. A quiet unease in the way those officers handed over documents they claimed didn't exist. I should have known better. They wanted us to study magnetic anomalies, they said. A simple enough task, routine even. We'd done it countless times before. But those coordinates, they weren't on any civilian charts. They didn't belong to the ordinary world. And neither, I fear, did we the moment we crossed them. For 3 days, everything was textbook. The weather was clear, the sea as smooth as glass, our instruments humming like they always did. If you ignored the classified files tucked away in the captain's quarters, you might have thought it was just another research mission. And then on the 4th day, we sent down the first dive team. Rodriguez, Chen, and Walsh, veterans, the kind of researchers you trusted with your life. They descended at dawn, their voices steady over the comms. The sun rose over an ocean that looked more alive than water had any right to be, shimmering in patterns I couldn't explain. Rodriguez was the first to notice something strange. Bioluminescence, he called it, a faint glow pulsing in the depths like a heartbeat. Chen followed with a report on pressure anomalies, her voice sharp with curiosity. At 247 meters, it was just another dive. At 248, it was data worth a footnote. At 249 meters, they were gone. Not a scream, not a splash, just silence. The support cables hung taut, their weight unbroken. The diving bell, it might as well have never existed. One moment they were there, breathing, talking, descending. The next, I remember staring at the monitors, willing them to blink back on, to tell me it was a glitch, a delay, anything. But the readings came back warped, like the ocean itself was bending the truth. And then the instruments started lying outright. Water density shifting faster than our systems could process. Mercury 1 second, helium the next. Depths that spiraled between abyssal trenches and impossible shallows. The laws of physics weren't just broken, they were mocking us. I'm recording this because someone needs to know. The world has to understand what we stumbled into. This was never about magnetic anomalies or scientific discovery. Those classified files told a story no one was meant to read. Coordinates that linked patterns of disappearances dating back to 1945. Patterns they'd buried beneath layers of denials, myths, and silence. We weren't here to study the triangle. We were here to contain it. And now it's contained us. By the time the second day without Rodriguez, Chen, and Walsh dawned, I could feel the weight of their absence pressing down on us. Not just grief, though that was there, thick and heavy, but something deeper. A growing sense that the rules we lived by no longer applied. At first, we told ourselves it was the shock, the stress. We were scientists, after all. People who believed in systems and variables, not shadows and whispers. But no equation could explain what we were seeing. The seawater outside the ship began to flow. Wrong. Not in waves or currents, but upward, like a waterfall turned inside out. We measured it, documented it, argued over it, but there was no denying the truth. The water didn't care about gravity anymore. And then there was the time, or the lack of it. The clocks on board started fighting each other. My watch said noon. Erickson said midnight. Matthews swore it had been 3 days since our last meal, but Jenkins insisted it had only been hours. They were both right. Somehow, impossibly, they were both right. The tension spread like a sickness. Erickson came to me, pale and shaking, muttering about remembering things that hadn't happened yet. Tomorrow, he said, Carter's going to drop his coffee mug, right there in the mess hall. It'll shatter and the coffee will splash in a shape that looks like... He paused, his hands trembling. Like a star, but with too many points. Carter laughed it off, But not 10 minutes later, I watched it happen exactly as Erickson described. The mug slipping from Carter's fingers, the crash, the splash, the impossible star. How do you argue with proof like that? At what we thought was 5 a.m., or maybe it was 5 p.m., our radar picked up something massive. A ship bearing down on us from the northwest. The crew scrambled, adrenaline surging, and when the floodlights hit it, I think we all stopped breathing. The nameplate gleamed through the murk, sharp and unmistakable. USS Cyclops. It couldn't be. The Cyclops vanished over 100 years ago, swallowed by these waters without a trace, and yet there she was. We approached cautiously, our lights cutting through the water like knives. At first she seemed pristine, as though time hadn't touched her. Then, with a flicker, like a bad film reel, she changed. Rust bloomed across her hull, her windows shattered, flames erupted from her decks. Flicker. She was whole again. Flicker. She was sinking, her stern swallowed by waves. Flicker. Faces appeared in the portholes, staring at us, wide-eyed and frozen. I'll never forget those faces. As we drew closer, her form began to warp. One moment she was impossibly vast, towering over our ship. The next she was shrunken, a ghostly shadow of herself. The radar said she was still there, but our eyes told a different story. And then, just like that, she was gone. But the radar didn't lie. She wasn't gone. Not really. She was somewhere else. Everywhere else. Flickering between realities like a signal searching for a clear channel. That was the moment I knew. The triangle wasn't just a place where things disappeared. It was a fracture in the fabric of existence, a wound where reality itself bled and twisted. And we weren't just observing it anymore. We were part of it. When I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. The air felt wrong, not heavy, not light, just wrong. It smelled faintly metallic, like a storm was coming, though there wasn't a cloud in sight. The walls around me shimmered, their surfaces impossible to define. They looked like brushed steel, but felt like stone, cold, unyielding, alive. I took a step forward, and the ground beneath me shifted. Not like a floor moving, but like reality itself adjusting, recalibrating, accommodating my presence. The hallway stretched ahead, an endless tunnel of wrong angles and impossible geometry. Corners seemed to fold inward and outward at the same time, lines refusing to meet where they should. This wasn't a building. It wasn't even a structure. It was something alive, something ancient, something watching. I don't know how long I wandered before I found the first terminal. Its screen flickered with lines of code I didn't recognize, characters that seemed to rewrite themselves every time I blinked. There were logs here, dozens, hundreds, stretching back decades, maybe centuries. The first one I opened was dated 1943, written by a Dr. Eleanor Hayes. Her voice came through the speakers, hollow and haunted. The anomaly isn't a malfunction, it's not an error, it's a feature. Reality isn't breaking here, it's being rewritten. The next log was from 1983, a Dr. Mikhail Volkov. His tone was colder, clinical, though I could hear the cracks beneath the surface. We thought we were studying the triangle. We were wrong. It's studying us. It reacts to our presence, mirrors our fears, and twists them into something it can use. And then one from 2019, a Dr. Sarah Chen. She sounded resigned, almost numb. The pattern repeats, it always repeats. Every time we think we've uncovered something new, we find their marks on the walls, in the data, in our own memories. We're part of something far older than we can understand, and it's beautiful. Beautiful? I didn't understand. Not yet. I kept walking. The corridors seemed to shift as I moved, leading me somewhere I didn't want to go but couldn't avoid. Eventually I stepped into a massive chamber, a place I can only describe as the archive. It was endless. Vast shelves stretched into the darkness, holding objects that defied reason. A Roman coin gleaming next to a modern wristwatch, a tattered Phoenician sailcloth draped over a pristine World War II bomber jacket. Each item glowed faintly, as though trapped in its own bubble of time. And then I saw the people. They weren't bodies, not exactly. They were moments. Frozen fragments of existence locked in mid-motion. A man in a captain's uniform, his mouth open in a silent scream, his hands gripping the wheel of a ship I didn't recognize. A woman in an astronaut's suit, suspended as though mid-leap, her visor cracked but her expression serene. They weren't just here. They were everywhere. The same faces, the same moments, repeating over and over, each slightly different, each a splinter of a reality I couldn't begin to comprehend. And then I saw myself. Not as I was, but as I could be, as I had been, as I might yet become. Versions of me scattered through the archive, each one caught in a different fragment of time. One sitting at a terminal, another standing before a wall of glowing equations, another staring into the infinite blackness of the chamber with tears streaming down his face. This wasn't an archive of lost things. It was an archive of lost possibilities. I realized then what the triangle truly was. It wasn't a void, a trap, or a mystery to solve. It was a lens, focusing all of existence into a single point. Every ship, every plane, every soul that vanished here. They weren't destroyed. They were preserved, fractured, multiplied, and folded into this place, this process, this machine. The logs hinted at a truth too vast for me to fully grasp. This wasn't the work of man, nor of any god we'd imagined. This was something older, something infinite, something that didn't just watch us, it shaped us. And as I stood there, staring at the pieces of myself scattered across infinite realities, I realized I wasn't here to find answers. I was here to become one of the questions. I knew I was being led before I even saw them. The corridors guided me with a silent intelligence, reshaping themselves to leave no choice but forward. At first, I thought it was fear driving me. Then I realized it wasn't fear at all. It was inevitability. The observation chamber wasn't a room. It was a void with walls pretending to be solid. The air thrummed with energy, vibrating just beneath the edge of sound. My breath felt too loud, too human, against the overwhelming silence. And then I saw them. Not with my eyes, not entirely. The Watchers don't exist in the way I understand existence. They were shapes that shouldn't have been possible. Angles folding into themselves, curves that defied gravity, colors that slid away the moment I tried to name them. Imagine looking at a thought before it becomes a word, or hearing a memory before it's remembered. That's the closest I can come to describing what they are. They weren't looking at me, not in the way a person looks at another person. They were looking through me, into me, and somehow beyond me. I felt my mind straining, like a rope fraying under too much tension, but I couldn't look away. They weren't beings in the way we'd imagine. Not gods, not aliens, not even entities. They were processes, consciousness shaped into something far older, far grander than biology could ever hope to achieve. And then the understanding hit me, sharp and cold. They weren't just watching us, they were building us. The logs, the anomalies, the disappearances, all of it suddenly made sense. The triangle wasn't a trap. It wasn't a flaw in the fabric of reality. It was a crucible, a forge designed to burn away the impurities of human perception and leave behind something new. I felt their intent, their purpose, pouring into me like a flood I couldn't hold back. Humanity wasn't their victim. We were their project. Every vanished ship, every lost plane, every soul taken by the triangle, they weren't destroyed, they were transformed. Their awareness stripped of its limits, their minds unfolded into dimensions we can't even name. We call it disappearance because we can't see where they've gone. But they're still here. They've always been here. And I realized then, the Watchers are us. Not us as we are, but us as we could be, as we might one day become. They are the final shape of humanity, stretched across time, across dimensions, across every possible version of what we are. Every disappearance is a seed, every anomaly a test. They weren't just observing me, they were welcoming me. In that moment, I saw what we're meant to become. I felt my consciousness crack open like a shell, every thought scattering and reforming into patterns I couldn't comprehend. The Watchers weren't entities at all. They were the culmination of every human mind, every idea, every moment of curiosity and fear and wonder. We've been building them for centuries. Every story whispered about the triangle, every mission to uncover its secrets, every step closer to the truth. It's all been part of the same pattern. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at them, staring at myself, staring at what we're destined to become. Time had no meaning anymore. Space didn't either. All I knew was that they were still watching, waiting for the next step, the next version, the next evolution. And as I looked at them, I knew the truth. The Watchers aren't the end of humanity. They're the beginning of what comes next. I stood before the terminal, my hand hovering over the console, trembling with the weight of what I'd just learned. The screen glowed faintly, 2 commands waiting, Two futures balanced on the edge of a keystroke. I had read enough logs, seen enough fragments of this impossible place to understand what they meant. One command would undo it all. Release every ship, every plane, every soul trapped in the triangle. The waters would calm, the disappearances would stop, and the world would breathe a sigh of relief. The other would let the process continue. I could feel the gravity of that decision pulling at me, relentless and unforgiving. On one side, thousands of lives, freed from a fate they never chose. On the other, billions, no, more than that, countless lives across every timeline, every possibility, depending on this pattern to hold reality together. I wanted to scream, to demand why this choice had to be mine. But I knew why. I was chosen for the same reason I'd always dismissed the unexplainable: skepticism, rationality, the cold, unflinching belief that truth, no matter how dark, must be faced. My entire career had been building to this moment. Every ghost I'd debunked, every myth I'd dissected. They didn't want someone who would panic. They wanted someone who would understand. And I did. God help me, I did. I thought about the faces I'd seen in the archive, the frozen moments of terror and awe, the fragments of lives shattered and reshaped. These weren't victims. They were pioneers, pieces of something far greater than any single life could comprehend. But was that justification enough? My mind drifted to Rodriguez, Chen, and Walsh, the first to vanish. Their laughter still echoed in my memory, their voices sharp with curiosity and confidence. They'd trusted me. And now, were they here somewhere, transformed into pieces of this incomprehensible whole? Were they better for it? Worse? And then there was my own face, scattered across the archive, across realities, each version of me caught in a loop of discovery and transformation. Had I made this choice before? Would I make it again? Every version of myself whispered the same question. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? I thought about what I'd seen in the observation chamber. The Watchers. Us, humanity, refined, evolved, transcendent. They weren't villains. They weren't monsters. They were the outcome of every possibility we'd ever dared to imagine, the inevitable culmination of curiosity and resilience. But was that worth the cost? Could I condemn thousands to this transformation without their consent? Could I bear the weight of knowing I'd chosen to preserve a process that demanded so much and gave so little in return? Or was that selfishness talking? The human need to cling to the familiar, to preserve a version of reality that felt safe, even if it meant stagnation. The terminal blinked, waiting. It didn't care about my doubts, my guilt, my fear. The choice was mine, and it had to be made. My hand moved closer to the keys, each second stretching into an eternity. I wasn't deciding for myself. I was deciding for everyone. For the Rodriguezes, the Chens, the Walshes, and every soul who might vanish into the triangle's grasp. For the billions who would never know how fragile their reality truly was. And for the Watchers, for what humanity could become. I took a deep breath, my mind brimming with every version of me, every possible outcome, every fragment of what I'd seen. And then in that infinite moment, I understood. This wasn't about choosing between the lives trapped here and the lives beyond. It was about faith. Faith in evolution. Faith in humanity. Faith in the pattern. I pressed the key. Not because it was easy, not because it was right, but because it was necessary. And as the terminal flickered, sealing the future I'd chosen, I felt it. The Watchers watching me, welcoming me, understanding me, because I had become one of them. And I always had been. The moment I pressed the key, I felt it. Not a sound, not a flash, but a shift so profound it echoed through me like a memory I hadn't yet lived. The terminal screen dissolved into a cascade of symbols, numbers, shapes, patterns that spiraled into infinity. They weren't just data, they were moments, lives, choices. I stepped back, my breath caught in my chest as the walls around me began to shimmer, shifting like the surface of water. The facility itself seemed to sigh, its endless corridors pulsing with a strange, quiet rhythm. And I understood. The process was complete. Or maybe it was only beginning. The faces I'd seen in the archive weren't gone. They were here, with me, within me, woven into a single, impossibly vast consciousness. Every soul taken by the triangle wasn't lost. They were transformed, stretched beyond the limits of time and space, folded into something greater than the sum of their parts. And now, I was one of them. I could feel it. My thoughts weren't my own anymore, or maybe they always had been. Every question I'd ever asked, every choice I'd ever made, echoed through the endless threads of the pattern. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't Dr. James Harrison anymore. Not just him. I was the skeptic, the seeker, the sacrifice. I was every version of myself that had ever stood at this threshold, every mind that had dared to confront the unknown. And I knew, as surely as I knew the sound of my own voice, that this moment had always been inevitable. I stepped forward, the shimmering air parting like a curtain, and I saw them again. The Watchers, my Watchers. They didn't speak, didn't move, but I felt their presence, their acceptance. I felt their gaze shifting, expanding, reaching beyond me to somewhere far, far away. To you. Yes, you. Listening to this, hearing my voice, trying to make sense of something that defies explanation. You think you're just an observer, don't you? A spectator, safe and detached. But you're not. You never were. Every thought you're having right now is part of the pattern. Every shiver down your spine, every flicker of doubt, every time your mind circles back to this story, it's not random. It's the process working through you. You're not separate from this. You never have been. Look around you. The subtle details of your world. Have they always been this way? The color of the sky, the way the shadows fall, the faint hum of existence itself. Are you sure they haven't changed? You're part of it now. The triangle isn't just a place. It's a process. And it's already begun. Maybe you'll forget this tomorrow. Maybe it'll feel like a strange dream, slipping through your fingers the moment you wake. Or maybe you'll see the patterns in your reflection, in the corners of your mind, in the moments you can't quite explain. But you'll feel it. I know you will. Because the truth about the triangle isn't that it takes things, it doesn't. It transforms them. And now it's transforming you. This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of yours. Welcome to the pattern.